My name is Helen. I am 79 years old. If someone had told me at 65 that I could be truly happy living alone, with no close friends nearby and no one waiting for me at the end of the day, I would have told them they did not understand what alone actually felt like. Today, I sit on my small back porch in Providence, Rhode Island, with a cup of tea and the sound of the garden, and I can tell you honestly that I have not felt this peaceful in decades. These 6 ways changed everything. I started learning them at 65, and I am still using every one of them today. Let me take you back to where it started. I spent 31 years as a school librarian. Books, children, colleagues, the particular noise of a building full of people who needed things from me every single day. When I retired, the silence arrived overnight, and I was not ready for it. The house felt too large. The evenings felt too long. I sat with one plate at the table and a phone that did not ring, and I told myself this was just an adjustment period, that it would pass. It did not pass on its own. I watched my friend Miriam spend her last years doing exactly what I was doing, waiting for the silence to become easier, filling it with television and small worries, never quite learning how to be at home in her own company. She died at 78, having spent 15 years in a quiet house she never made peace with. I did not want that to be me. Then I had a health scare. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to put me in a doctor's office being told plainly that stress and isolation were doing measurable damage and that I needed to change not my circumstances, but my relationship with them. That conversation was the beginning of everything. I started small and frightened. 14 years later, I am here to tell you precisely what worked in the order I learned it, because the order mattered. Way 1, move gently and let nature be your first companion. In the early weeks after I retired, I hardly left the house. My body felt stiff from sitting. My mood was flat in a way I did not know how to describe to anyone who was not feeling it. The walls of my small house started closing in the way walls do when you stop believing anything good is happening on the other side of them. One morning, I remembered something my father used to say. The body needs to move the way a fire needs air. You can keep it going with very little, but you cannot keep it going with nothing. I did not join a gym. I did not buy new shoes. I simply opened the back door and stepped outside. I started with 10 minutes on the back step, just 10 minutes, sitting in the morning air, letting the sun find my face, watching the sparrows argue at the feeder my late husband installed the year before he died. Something in me softened. The cold air, the small sounds, the specific quality of outdoor light that no lamp has ever replicated. It reminded me that the world was still happening and I was still in it. After a week of 10-minute mornings, I started walking to the end of the street and back, then around the block. My knees complained for the first few days and then settled into the rhythm the way knees do when you give them something regular to do. My shoulders came down, my breathing changed. The flat mood did not disappear, but it lifted slightly, and slightly was enough to keep going. I planted 3 pots of herbs on the back step: mint, rosemary, thyme. Not because I needed them for cooking, though I used them. Because I needed something alive that required me to check on it every morning. Something that would look different today than it looked yesterday. Tending those 3 pots gave my mornings a small purpose before I had found a larger one. Nature does not ask anything from you. It does not need you to be interesting or cheerful or good company. It simply lets you be there. That is exactly what I needed in those early months. If your house feels too small today, try this tomorrow. Step outside for 10 minutes. Stand still. Notice one thing: the color of the sky, the sound of whatever birds are near you, the way the air feels on your face. That is the whole instruction. Just 10 minutes and one thing noticed. Way 2. Feed the part of your mind that never actually retired. Once my body started moving again, I noticed something else. My mind was restless and bored in equal measure, and those 2 things together made for a miserable combination. I had spent 31 years surrounded by books and had barely read one for pleasure in all that time. I gave myself permission to read whatever I wanted, not what I thought I should want, not what a book group would have chosen, but whatever genuinely interested me. I started with natural history, birds specifically. I had been watching the sparrows at the feeder without knowing anything about them, and I wanted to know more. I borrowed 3 books from the library and read 10 pages every afternoon in the garden. My mind woke up the way a room wakes up when you open the curtains. I started noticing details I had been walking past for years. The specific way light moved across the garden wall at 4 in the afternoon. The difference between a house sparrow and a song sparrow. The fact that the robin who appeared every morning at the same patch of ground was probably the same robin, and that she had a territory and a routine as deliberate as mine. Curiosity, I discovered, is not something that runs out. It is something that runs down when you stop feeding it. Feed it almost anything and it comes back. My neighbor Patricia, who is 81 now, decided to learn watercolor painting at 76 from free tutorials on her laptop. She laughs at her own paintings and keeps doing them. She told me her afternoons are the best part of her day now, which is something she could not have said 5 years ago. Choose one thing you have always been curious about. Read 10 pages of a book about it. Watch one short video. Write one sentence about what you learned. The goal is not expertise. The goal is to stay interested in the world, because a mind that is interested in something is a mind that is not drowning in its own silence. Way 3. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you actually care about. Even after I started moving and reading, my own thoughts could still be unkind. I would catch myself in the middle of an ordinary afternoon thinking things I would never say to another person. You are alone because you have become boring. You have nothing to offer anyone anymore. You are going to spend whatever time you have left in this house waiting for it to be over. Those thoughts hurt more than loneliness itself, and I realized I had let them run without question for years. I started a simple practice. Every evening before bed, I opened a small notebook and wrote down one thing that had been good that day. At first, the list was very modest. The tea was hot. The garden looked well. I finished a chapter. But I kept writing one thing every evening, and over weeks, the practice trained my attention toward what was still good rather than what was absent. I also started catching the unkind voice and answering it directly. If the thought said, "You are useless now," I would stop and say aloud, quietly, to myself, "You spent 31 years putting the right books into the hands of children who needed them. That is not useless." It felt strange at first. It stopped feeling strange after a few weeks and started feeling necessary. Your own voice is the loudest voice in a quiet house. Make sure it is a voice that is on your side. Way 4. Make peace with solitude by treating it as something you chose rather than something that happened to you. By the time I reached this step, I had been walking outside and feeding my mind and speaking more kindly to myself for several months. The house was still quiet, but it had stopped feeling like a punishment. I realized I had been running from solitude my entire adult life. There had always been something to organize, someone who needed something, a reason not to sit still. I started giving myself permission to be alone without trying to fill the alone with something. I would sit in my chair by the window with no book, no radio, no phone, just me and the room and whatever thoughts came. At first, 5 minutes felt like a long time. Then 10 minutes felt ordinary. Then one rainy Saturday, I sat by the window watching rain move across the garden and realized I was not uncomfortable. I was simply there, in a house that was mine, in an afternoon that was mine, with no obligation to be anywhere or anyone else. That was the afternoon I stopped being afraid of my own company. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is wanting to be somewhere else. Solitude is being exactly where you are and finding it sufficient. The path from one to the other is not dramatic. It is just time and patience and the willingness to stop running. Way 5. Build small daily rituals that belong entirely to you. Once the quiet stopped frightening me, I needed to give my days a shape that was mine. Retirement had removed all the structures I had relied on without my noticing how much I relied on them. The days started to blur without edges. I created small rituals. Every morning at 7, I make tea in the same blue pot my sister gave me 30 years ago. I carry it to the back step and sit for 10 minutes regardless of weather. In the evenings, I light one candle at the kitchen table and read for half an hour before anything else. On Sunday mornings, I call my daughter and we talk for as long as we want without either of us watching the clock. These are not large things, but they give the day a skeleton. They tell my mind, this is what order looks like. This is what belonging to yourself looks like. This moment is not empty. This moment is mine, and I chose it. Choose one small thing you can do every day just for yourself. Make it simple enough that you will actually do it. Do it with attention. Say to yourself, even silently, this is mine. You will be surprised how much a single daily ritual changes the texture of a week. Way 6. Find a purpose that does not require crowds or applause. By now I was moving, learning, speaking kindly to myself, sitting with solitude, following my small rituals. I felt better than I had since before I retired. But something was still missing, and it took me a while to name it. I needed to feel useful. Not important, not admired, just useful. Like I was still giving something of myself to the world. I started volunteering one morning a week at the local library, mending damaged books. Quiet work, careful work, the kind that suits someone who has spent a lifetime caring about books. I sit at a table with small tools and old spines, and I fix things that would otherwise be lost. Nobody watches, nobody applauds. But when I put a mended book back on the shelf, I feel something I can only describe as right. I also write letters, short ones, by hand, to former colleagues, to my daughter, to a woman I met once at a hospital waiting room 12 years ago and never saw again but still think about sometimes. I write because writing is giving something of yourself, and giving something of yourself, even to someone who may not write back, is its own quiet reward. Purpose does not have to be large. It only has to be real. Find one small way to give something of yourself this week. Call someone who lives alone. Write a letter. Offer to do one thing for one person. The size of the gesture does not matter. The intention does. I am 79 years old. My house is still quiet most of the time. My daughter lives far away. I have one close friend nearby, and we have tea every other week. That is the shape of my social life, and it is enough because the rest of my life is full. I move with nature every morning. I feed my curious mind every afternoon. I speak to myself with the patience I would offer a dear friend. I sit with the silence and find it companionable. I follow my small rituals and they hold the days together. I give something of myself every week to something outside my own four walls. I turned alone into a life I genuinely enjoy living. You can do the same. You do not need to feel ready. You only need to begin with one small thing today. Pick whichever of these 6 feels most possible right now and do one small version of it before tomorrow. Your future self is already grateful that you started. Take good care of yourself. I will see you in the quiet.